Hey everyone, Steven here from Redolessence with another fragrance review, and this time it's on the designer house of Versace, and the fragrance is called Eros. Now, Versace Eros is a fragrance that debuted or premiered last year in 2012. It was actually showcased in Cannes, France at the TFWA, which pretty much stands for Tax-Free World Association. It's an annual world exhibition that's hosted pretty much for companies who want to get together and showcase a new product that's an anticipated release for that year or the following year. Versace decided to attend this event and showcase Eros, which was the anticipated, bestseller for 2013, and it's actually the first men's release since Versace Pour Homme, which was released back in 2008, I believe. So this one is not necessarily 5 years in the making, but it has been 5 years since their most recent men's release. So this one was actually a very anticipated release on my behalf. Very happy to have it in my possession, and it's actually a fairly recent acquisition of mine. Now, although this one was debuted last year in 2012, it's only this year, 2013, that it's become more readily available. I believe this one is exclusive to Macy's. I'm sure later on in the year you're going to be able to find this one at other department stores like Sephora. Same thing that happened with Spice Bomb by Viktor and Rolf. At first it was only available in Nordstrom's. Now you can find it in Sephora, and of course 6 months down the line after the release you'll be able to find this one online at like FragranceNet, FragranceX, so on and so forth, other online discounters like that. Now this is a fairly new release, but it's the first, like I said, the first men's release since Versace Pour Homme, and Versace releases for me seem to be few and far between. What I mean by that is it's not too often that Versace comes out with a new fragrance, but when they do, it's usually a solid release. So let's look at Versace Pour Homme, Versace Man Eau Fraiche, Versace Man, The Dreamer, which is, almost, it's like you either love it or you hate it, but for those who do, they really do love it. So Versace fragrances, for the most part, seem to be solid releases, and being that it's been 5 years since they released a men's fragrance, I was very, very much anticipating this release, and I was hoping that this would be a solid release. Is it? I'm not going to divulge that just yet, but there are a few reasons why I was skeptical on whether or not this would actually be a solid release from the house of Versace. Now, for a fragrance that has been not necessarily in the making for 5 years, but for a company that has had 5 years to come out with a fragrance, I was expecting a lot of work and a lot of detail put into this fragrance, in both, of course, the scent itself, but the presentation, and that detail was, of course, satisfied. First off, let's start off with the name, Eros. It's actually the name of the Greek god of love, who happens to be the son of goddess Aphrodite, who's the goddess of love and beauty. So the god of love, Eros, many of you may be familiar with the Roman counterpart, Cupid, right? I don't need to go into too much detail there. Now, Gianni Versace, the founder of the house, has always had a fascination with Greek mythology, and there are many mythological aspects as far as they're intertwined with the fragrances. First off, the Medusa symbol smack dab in the middle of the bottle, and it's actually on the cap too, which I'm going to show a little bit in the presentation of the fragrance. So, there are all these mythological implications that tend to, be inherited in the bottle, in the box, and many of, Versace's presentations, and the Medusa logo is pretty much used in every fragrance, if I'm not mistaken. Now, another thing that Eros means, and it's actually used in philosophy and psychology, it's actually a Greek word that's supposed to represent one of the 4 stages of love. So we have storge, Eros, philia, and agape, and Eros actually means romance, or it could mean intimate love. So I think the suggestion being made here on behalf of the company is that if you wear this fragrance, it's going to encourage a woman to get more intimate with you. Again, if you look at the advertising campaign for this one, I'm sure it means that it's probably more so, the God aspect as opposed to the philosophical term or the psychological term. But nevertheless, it does mean romantic, so it's kind of like a double entendre there. And of course, there's so much more going on with the color of the bottle, but again, that's something that I'm going to get into when I talk about the presentation. Now, in terms of this fragrance being hit or miss, what I mean by that is the perfumer behind this fragrance, Guichard of Guichard, actually composed this fragrance, and his compositions, for the most part, are either very well received by the community, the fragrance community that is, or they're not so favorably received. So a couple of the fragrances that are well received are, of course, Bond Number 9's Andy Warhol Silver Factory, Bond Number 9's Chinatown, and then the flops, as one would put it, are, of course, Gucci Guilty, and of course, Le Mal Terrible. Le Mal Terrible, I think, primarily was not so favorably received just because it's a flanker of the infamous Le Mal, which is, of course, Mason Francis Kurkdjian, I believe either 95 or 96, possibly 95. And of course, it's kind of hard to live up to that standard. Do I think this one is a hit, or do I think this one is a miss? I'll let you know what I think, but next up we have the presentation for Eros by Versace. Here we have the presentation for Eros by Versace. This is a fragrance that is available in two sizes, 50 milliliters and 100 milliliters. This is the large size, the 100 milliliter and 3.4 fluid ounce bottle. First up, we have the box for the presentation, and this is actually just a stunning display. It's a beautiful blue bottle, and of course the color coincides with the bottle and the box, and this is supposed to represent the blue of the Mediterranean, and of course it's one of the colors of the Greek flag, with the other one actually being white. Not really a color but a hue, but nevertheless, I digress. Beautiful box. You do have the Greek key serving as a border for both the bottle and the box. You have the Medusa logo, which is actually the Versace logo, engraved in the middle here, the name of the house and the fragrance embossed here in the front. You can actually feel it. Some more information down here at the very bottom of the box. Nothing going on at the sides, very plain. The cardboard is pretty thin too, but very well manufactured, I think. And then you also have the name of the house embossed here at the top. You can feel it as well. On the back here, you do have Versace written again at the top. Some more information at the bottom, and at the very bottom of this fragrance, you do have all the selling information like the UPC code. The expiration date for this fragrance is actually 36 months, and then the serial number is located right here in the top right hand corner. Mine is SA122. That's it as far as the box goes. Now the real display and the real beautiful presentation of this fragrance is the bottle. I'm very proud to have this one in my collection, and it actually looks gorgeous. It's actually very heavy, as is the cap. Now as far as the bottle itself goes, you have this Greek key encompassing the entire perimeter of the front of the bottle. It actually serves as a border, and it looks really, really nice. You have the Medusa or the Versace logo actually popping out, and you can see how much it pops out in this fragrance. It looks very, very nice. You have the name of the fragrance and the house right on top of it here in the front. Very well done, beautiful display. Nothing going on at the sides, but on the back you also have this Greek key. It's a little more capricious and haphazard in the back, just scattered all over the place, but still looks really, really nice. It stands out on your shelf. You do have a sticker down here at the bottom with your information, and of course the serial number coincides with that written on the box. And even on the cap here, you'll notice that there's a Medusa logo, and it actually just looks absolutely gorgeous. A lot of detail put into this cap as well. The atomizer is not the best in the game, but it actually does offer a very thick burst. As you can tell there at the end, it has a tendency of squirting, so just be mindful of that. But overall, a beautiful presentation, and that has been the presentation for Eros by Versace. Now, as far as the smell goes for this fragrance, I'm just going to spray a little bit on my hand here, just to remind myself of the introduction for this fragrance, and quite a beautiful burst there, as I already mentioned in the presentation. Okay, it's going to take a while for this to settle in, but right off the bat, one thing that you're going to notice is that there is a blast of mint and lemon in this fragrance. More so, you're going to get a lot more lemon from this fragrance than I think you're going to get mint. Of course, the lemon note in this fragrance is fleeting, as most citrus notes are, and based on my experiences with this fragrance, and I have been testing it out now for about a month, it seems to last anywhere from 15 minutes to about a half hour, but for the first minute or so, all that you're going to be able to get is the mint and the lemon. Now, another funny thing to mention about those two coupling ingredients in the introduction are that the mint, yes, it's very detectable, it's perceivable, you're going to be able to smell it in this fragrance, but it doesn't quite have that effect that mint does in other fragrances. And what I mean by that is, many times when you smell mint, it's uplifting, it's invigorating, it's rejuvenating, and it almost has like the effect, or the olfactory effect, of like Vicks Vapor Rub. Like, you know, whenever you smell Vicks and you can almost feel it in your lungs and, you know, your esophagus and everything, it doesn't quite have that effect. Although you can pinpoint that there is mint in this composition, it just doesn't have that effect on you where you can't really feel it as you're inhaling it. But nevertheless, it does smell great. And those two fragrances coupled with each other have actually given way to this fragrance getting compared with a lot of other fragrances in its particular genre. Of course, this one is a woody Oriental fragrance just because it has a prominent cedar wood backbone. But this one does get compared a lot to other fragrances in the market, like the Gold Bullion itself, Paco Rabanne's 1 Million. And I certainly see where other people are going with that comparison. This fragrance, on the other hand, I think has more of those woody facets that offer quite a bit of depth into the fragrance profile of this fragrance. Both smell great, of course, you know, don't get me wrong, but I think this one has more of a woody backbone than Paco Rabanne's 1 Million does. People have said that this is very evocative of like the fluoride that you would get at the dentist's office that you rinse your mouth with. Personally, it doesn't quite have that evocation with me. I can see where people are coming from. I think it's a variety of different ingredients and notes in this fragrance that give off that impression to people. But for the most part, I think it's the mint. There's a green apple note that's resting on the very top of this composition as well that I think gives way or allows for those comparisons to be made. Now, do I think this one smells like bubblegum? Mildly. I think, you know, because there is a vanilla note in here, and of course as chocolate is said to be an aphrodisiac, so is vanilla. Vanilla is said to be an aphrodisiac. So I think that's part of the advertising campaign, and of course it's probably methodically and strategically chosen by either Aurelien Guichard, the composer of this fragrance himself, or possibly even the creative director for this fragrance, you know, being that the theme of this fragrance is romance and intimate love and intimacy and everything. So vanilla plays a vital role in this fragrance. To my nose, I think it's vanillin. You know, it does appear to be of a synthetic nature, as does the geranium in this fragrance. But nevertheless, I do think it smells nice. It certainly does have a familiar smell if you smelled other, you know, vanilla-based fragrances that have, you know, a synthetic scent profile to them. This one does smell quite similar to that, and I think that's one of the reasons why this gets compared to a lot of other fragrances. Now, there is an apple note in this fragrance as well. I know with many people, when you think apple, you think Boss Bottle No. 6, Lacoste Red, or Style and Play. This one doesn't really give off the impression of any of those two fragrances, for me at least, because I think the apple note, although it is very present in the fragrance, is just covered up by that vanilla note, and the vanilla really makes it difficult for you to dissect anything else in this fragrance. Even the woody facets of this fragrance, and like I said, cedar wood is an ingredient, or I should say two ingredients in this fragrance. They actually have two types of cedar. You have Virginia cedar that's used in this fragrance, and also Atlas cedar. And of course, Atlas cedar is harvested in, was it Algeria, I believe. I don't think the two have a difference, and I'm sure they probably do have a different scent profile, which is why the perfumer would use more than one variety of it. But I don't have too much experience with those two notes individually, so I can't say if there really is too much of a difference with those two. Not any that I'm able to pinpoint by just smelling the fragrance as a whole, but nevertheless, there are two types of cedar used in this fragrance. I can certainly smell cedar, I just don't know which one to attribute it to. Okay, so as it's starting to dry down, you're going to get that vanilla, mint, apple combo that's up front and center. If you try to detect any other notes, you do have to wait much more into the dry down of this fragrance. And of course, vanilla is used as a fixative in many fragrances, which means it prolongs the duration or the longevity of the fragrance. So vanilla is certainly going to be perceptible from the very opening of the fragrance, even though it's masked by that lemon note, all the way up until the dry down. Now, the woody notes, of course, start to become more prevalent in the dry down. Of course, they do serve as an undertone in this fragrance, I think. There's also a geranium note, and many of these fragrances, like, you know, Bubblegum Chic by Healy, which is an extrite, those fragrances, the reason they smell like bubblegum is because of the floral nuances to them. So I think one of the reasons why this one smells so much like bubblegum is the geranium. So people, and I have gotten a few people who told me personally that they don't smell too much geranium in this fragrance. That might partly be because they don't have experience with geranium, you know, as a note individually, but I'm telling you, certainly there is geranium in this fragrance. I can certainly pick it out. I just think that the vanilla plays such a big role in this fragrance that it doesn't allow too many people to notice that there's geranium in this fragrance, but there certainly is. A couple other ingredients listed are vetiver and oak moss. I also have experience with those two ingredients. I can tell you personally, I don't get too much of those ingredients, but I certainly do get more vanilla and apple than anything. And the mint note seems to last a lot longer than the lemon note, which actually was a surprise to me, but I think it's a fragrance that's very well done, and the scent is certainly very appealing. Now, Venezuelan ambroxan is also listed as a note in this fragrance. To take a synthetic aroma chemical like ambroxan, which is supposed to be, of course, an alternative to the very expensive ambergris, and to assign it a country of origin, to me is kind of nonsensical. I mean, I see where they're going with that. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's of a natural nature, if that makes any sense. Although it is synthetic, they just, I think, mean that it's supposed to smell like ambergris that's found in Venezuela. But to give a synthetic aroma chemical a country of origin, in my opinion, is a bit nonsensical. But nevertheless, I do kind of smell like an ambergris vibe from this fragrance, but it's nothing so prominent that it's too worthy of a mention. But in any case, it's there. Again, I just think it's masked by the lemon and the mint and the apple and the vanilla, that it doesn't really give way to many people being able to perceive it as a note in this fragrance. I can see the compliment factor on this fragrance being very high. I've actually gotten complimented on this fragrance before, and you know, I think the Versace house put out a pretty solid release with this fragrance. Now that's all I have to say about the smell, but next up we have the rating for Eros by Versace. Now, as far as the rating goes for this fragrance, first up we have uniqueness and overall smell, and this fragrance earned for me a 7 out of 10. Of course, this one came a little bit late as far as other fragrances in the genre are concerned, and because the smell of this fragrance has allowed itself to give way to being compared to so many other fragrances, I kind of feel like this one took something that has been done before so many times and just offers a different interpretation on it. I do think it's very well done, but just because for many people it's evocative of other fragrances in the genre, I couldn't really give this fragrance too high of a mark, but 7 out of 10 I think will suffice, and I think it's an excellent mark because this is a solid release from the house of Versace. Maybe not the best, you know, fragrance out there, but it's certainly a great fragrance, and it certainly gets the job done. So 7 out of 10 for uniqueness and overall smell. Next up we have longevity, and this one actually earned for me an 8 out of 10. Longevity for me is actually great on this fragrance. I have gotten 8+ hours, and I'm sure it's the vanilla and the woods that really allowed this fragrance to last as long as it does, but an 8 out of 10 I think is an excellent score. And then of course remaining or retaining some of that consistency into the projection of this fragrance, I also gave it an 8 out of 10. This one projects for about 5 to 6 hours, which is actually excellent. I rarely get that from a designer fragrance, especially one of this compositional nature with these semi-faux gourmand aspects like the apple and the vanilla and the mint, but this one does a really great job at projecting. I get 5 to 6 hours, so I gave it an 8 out of 10. Then next up we have versatility, and I gave this fragrance a 7 out of 10. Now, first up, let me address that this is a fragrance that's marketed for men. I do think that most of the aspects of this fragrance, like the apple and the mint, the vanilla, they're very androgynous. So they could be used in a women's fragrance very much the same way that they could be used in a men's fragrance. So for me, it was really hard for me to justify that the ingredients in this fragrance are predominantly male or female, but I think it could go either way. Marketed for men, it could be worn by a woman. In terms of social scenarios, this would make it an excellent signature scent, especially if you have more of a playful personality. I think this could also work very well on a night out. Of course, the gourmand aspects make this a fragrance that's excellent for a night out, although it's not a gourmand in nature. It is a woody oriental, but it does have those gourmand aspects, so keep that in mind. And of course, I think this one is geared more toward the hotter weather because of its compositional nature. I don't think that the woods are strong enough that would allow this fragrance to be worn more in a colder climate, but nevertheless, I do think that this one is geared more toward the hotter weather. So I gave this one a 7 out of 10 for versatility, and then last up we have the presentation, and I already told you what I feel about that. It's just absolutely excellent from the bottle to the box, and I gave this one a 10 out of 10 for presentation, and then that brings this fragrance to an overall rating or an average score of 8 out of 10. So there you have it. That was my review of Eros by Versace. Thank you so much for watching. Again, please don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe. It would be greatly appreciated. If you'd like, please join my Facebook group. I will leave a link down in the description section below. So thank you. We would love to have you as part of that family. And again, thank you guys so much for watching. This has been Stephen with another fragrance review from Redolessence. Thanks again.